Okay, so this morning we talked about, we talked about a bunch of stuff. Um, we talked about using PG specifically because we wanted to connect our SQL queries and our need for data to drive our application with the actual logic of our application. So now I want to take that a step further. We went pretty far this morning with building out, different functions for fetching different types of data, even parsing command line input and stuff like that. We talked about security, we talked about parameterized queries, and like with a lot of other things that you'll do from this point forward in the course, and you've heard me say this before, there reaches a point where as soon as it seems like it might be hard, you're probably doing it the wrong way. And this is where libraries like Connects come in. So within the world of programming, one of the things you will find that is the most opinionated, without exception, is the database library that people choose to align themselves with and pick as their favorite. And everybody will tell you 100% that it is the best one, and you need to be using this one, and if you're not using this one, you're doing it wrong. And truthfully, if it works, that's what matters. Connects works. It is one of the many options out there for JavaScript. It plays very nicely with Express and the standard kind of form of a node server, but it is not the only answer. But it is a great way, once you learn Connects and you learn the patterns that it has, you will then have a good solid understanding of how most of the database libraries are going to approach solving the problem of making your life easier in working with the database directly. So Connects is an abstraction. It is a layer between you and actually writing raw SQL. And so the goal here is to help you build queries. Connects is very specifically a query builder library, meaning that there are methods that you will use in Connects that allow you to construct the various clauses of your SQL query, and then when it actually gets executed, Connects will take the methods you have used, build a properly formatted SQL query, and execute it, giving you the results back that you can work with. Now, that seems like it's going to create more code because now you've got methods for everything that you might be doing, but there's a couple of benefits here that we can talk about. If we talk about what we did this morning, for example, with PG, and we wanted to select all from players. We would be writing client.query, select star from players, and then that would be how we would write that basic query. And then we'd have, of course, have the callback that would process it. With Connects, it becomes that. That's simpler. Much nicer. It's cleaner. It's easier to read. If I had a query, for example, where position equals C, so I'm trying to find all the centers in my database, then I have that. So this is the idea where we are now using methods to represent the various clauses of our query. If I, for example, wanted to narrow this down so that I was only selecting ID and the name, just to get the ID and the name of the centers, I can go either here at before my .where, I can go afterwards, it doesn't matter where I run the method, and I can choose what it is that I want to select. So I can still choose to select specific fields. I can choose to use where and filter. I could, let's say that instead of position equals center, I wanted where goals is greater than 20. So I can still take care of this. I'm going to go one extra step with so I have to I have to do 3 parameters here. If I have 2 parameters, it's assumed it's an equals. That's where I'm looking for a specific finite value. But if I'm doing a comparison, I can do it this way. Goals greater than, less than, not equal to. I can do all of those comparators just by passing field, comparison operator, and value. And that allows me to filter all of those things. I can then, for example, order by goals descending. And that would be my order by clause. And if I wanted to get the top 10 players, I could limit 10. So now I'm in a case where I am doing what's called method chaining. In fact, I can start to write this a bit better so that we can see where all these methods are lining up. So I'm just chaining these methods together in order to programmatically build a query. And then where here I would then have my callback where I would have my res.rows, that would be my results. With connects, I'm going to chain one more method. And it's going to give me the rows directly. So I don't have to worry about getting the results object back with all of the other metadata with it. It gives me the rows directly because, let's face it, that's what I queried for. So using .asCallback allows me to use a pattern that I already know. And it allows me to still check for things like, if rows.length, do a thing, rows.forEach, and or do a for loop over them. It doesn't matter. I could do a for of, I could do a for in, I can loop over that data however I want to do it. But the nice part is I now have this ability to register a callback for what to do with that data when eventually it asynchronously returns. So what's changing here is instead of us having to write raw SQL, we're now given a library of methods that will build the query for us. And it doesn't matter what order I put those methods in, which is kind of cool. As long as I get all the methods in there that I want to have in my query, then at the point where I run the asCallback, connects goes off, does the query, gives me the results back, and has built the SQL query the way that I wanted it to be. So the important part here is that I have to know what the SQL query is first in order to effectively use connects. Connects does not magically make the process of selecting the data easier. It just makes it easier for me to now work with this in order to now approach it programmatically. Because here's what I can do. I can say let query equals this, and then I can come down here, and if user.admin, bless you, I can now extend this out and keep building on this, and then ultimately run query.asCallback. So I now have this query builder object, which I can keep building onto, conditionally use certain methods on. I can choose how I want to build that query out. It's not until I actually need the results that I'm going to have that query run. So whatever has been built on that query at the point where I run it, that's what connects will do. So this, yeah, Shmoo.
Before you put the asCallback, the other stuff starts to happen, but then it just doesn't go without the callback.
So the question there is I'm going to slightly translate your question as to what the hell is happening before you actually run the as callback.
Yeah.
What's happening there is connects is starting to build a string that is my query. And each method is adding another Lego piece onto this. And so this connects object that exists that comes back from me running the function of connects is just slowly accruing the various pieces that are going to be the ultimate query. By itself, this right here gives me select star from players. So then if I add, for example, a .where clause, that select star from players where goals is greater than 20. If, for example, I get to here, because of the conditional statement, if I get to here and I'm running this .select, well, then it's going to change select star from players to select ID, name from players. So it's programmatically building those pieces of that overall string, and then at the point where I now need to get results, that's when it takes whatever the resulting string is and go to the PG driver, which it uses in the background that we've already looked at, and says, shot web, go, make things. Yeah, Clive.
Something that really helped me out is if you take that query, say you build this query,
Yep.
just did the console log query.toString, like
Oh,
everything makes sense all of a sudden.
yes. Yes. So there's toString. There's also toSQL. So it will show you. It depends on which way you want to see it. But yeah, you can get. Connects actually has the toString method. Let me zoom in a bit further here. So this is showing, for example, that we're selecting connects from a table, we're accessing the table named table, and we're going to insert an object. And then we're going to return star, and we just want .toString. So what this returns is this just gives us the string of the query itself. And then the other way that we can see this is toSQL, where what toSQL will show us, if I spelled it correctly, here we go, is it will actually show us the whole object that Connects is building. And there will be a SQL key in that object that's going to show us the full query that's parameterized at that point. So here's another cool point. Connects parameterizes internally by default. You can still break this. You can still jam user input directly into a string and give it to Connects, and Connects is going to do its best to do with it what you gave it. But we can see, for example, that the Connects query here is connects.select star, which you kind of didn't need that. We can choose to manually specify .from users. I could have just written that as connects users, would have had the same effect. Where connects raw ID equals this. So here's where we are wanting to force a parameterized query to happen by giving it the values. And this is very similar to what we saw this morning, except instead of $1, we're using a question mark for the placeholder. And then when we run toSQL on it, we can see that the query is select star from users where ID equals question mark. And there's this bindings key here. And that's what gets replaced. So it names things a little bit differently than what we did this morning. That doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's different. Different is good. But toSQL allows us to see what's going on. For example, adding toNative on here shows it what it would be in PostgreSQL. So select star from users where ID equals $1. So that's the actual query that it's going to pass to Postgres to run this query. It's just Connects uses question marks for placeholders, and Postgres uses $1, $2, etc., etc. Connects automatically translates that for you. You don't have to worry about what the Postgres syntax is. Now you get to worry about what the Connects syntax is. No pressure, right? So if we were to look at some of our queries that we ran earlier today, and we'll talk about how to configure connects in just a second, but if we were to look at these, select star from teams where city equals $1 or name equals $1 limit 1. So we would have connects teams, because that is select star from teams. And then we would have where, city, and here we're looking for data, because that's our value. And then maybe we want to question how we would do an or where query. Oh, look, there's a method called dot or where. Sounds good. Dot or where. Name is data. Limit 1. And so this query here is the same as what we had above, but we've programmatically assembled it using methods and had to write less SQL syntax and been able to write more JavaScript syntax. Anything that allows us to kind of stay in one language is typically a better experience for us as developers than having to cross over. Think of all the fun you had last week bouncing back and forth between HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then throwing some Mongo in on top of that, which is still kind of JavaScript mostly. But if we're now able to keep this going just using JavaScript methods, pretty straightforward. Here again, connects players, where, and here I would actually use, if I need to specify something like the like query, I'm going to use connects raw so that I can write raw SQL. Name, like. And here I would actually put just a question mark, and then I would do the same thing that I did before. And by doing that, connects is going to parameterize that for me. But using connects.raw, I don't have a where like method, or at least I didn't the last time I was in here. Yep, nope, there's no where like. So we don't even have a like, or they do it this way. I can do it this way actually with a third param. I lied. Huh, cool. I've been writing them as raw queries all this time. Helps if you check the documentation. So there we go. That makes it even easier.
I had to do a raw query earlier. I couldn't find that.
Yeah, I've been doing raw queries for 3 years. Yeah, for likes. So cool. I learned something today. And we're not trying to go for brevity. We're not trying to make a smaller line of code between these two. But the really cool thing about this is now that we are looking at it in terms of JavaScript methods, the individual clauses are broken down pretty clearly so that we can see what's happening with our query. What was the last one we had? So here we go. This last one we have, this one is a join. So, you know, this one is going to take a few more methods. So we'd have connects players, because that's the main table that we're selecting from. We're going to select. So we can look at our dot select, and well, there's an example on here that I'm looking for. One moment, I will find it, I promise. Here we go. So here we have a select with a join, and it's how it's specifying the fields. This, because connects uses PG under the hood, we don't get away from that gotcha that we saw this morning where we're joining two tables with a column of the same name. So we still have to be just as explicit with our selects. So I'm going to be selecting players.name, players.position, and players.goals. I'm going to be really explicit with those, especially players.name. And then my join method, I can see that I've got several join methods provided. There's .join, there's .left join, there's left outer join, there's right join, there's right outer join, full outer join, cross join. Basically, if there's a way for me to join two tables together, it gives me a method for it. And I did a left join here, so let's use the left join method. I'm left joining teams, and that is on teams.id equals players.teamid. And then I'm going to do my where. Teams.name, data, or where, teams.city, data. Now that's written out just as one great big long line, and if I don't like that, and I would encourage you not to like that, I would probably want to format it. So there we go. So I would format it that way for readability. It's going to function exactly the same. But now I'm in a situation where I have broken down each one of the clauses of my query and just defined the parts of it as parameters to the function. So select, I can pass as many parameters to this as I want. My left join, it reads pretty well. I'm left joining teams on teams.id equals players.teamid. So it reads pretty straightforward as far as what's going on. I'm just taking each piece of that clause, passing it as a parameter. Connects will do the rest. With me so far? Clear as mud? Awesome. So in every single one of these cases, you'll notice that I haven't had to put the data in an array like this. Connects will take care of that for me behind the scenes. And in fact, I've just been able to pass the data as a second parameter, but because I have passed it as a parameter to the function, Connects is going to pass it as a parameter to the query. So it will be a parameterized query because I've done this. If I had started going in and using connects.raw and interpolating the string right in there, that's where things start to go wrong for me from a security point of view, and I get to be in danger of SQL injection. So always, always, always use parameters. I can tell you from experience, anytime you think you have a good reason to go in and manually interpolate that into a string, I promise you don't actually. And then you're like, but I need it for this bit of syntax. There's a better way. Even connects.raw will still let you parameterize the query. So yeah, take advantage of that at every single point. So, yeah.
The SQL injection thing.
Yep.
I did that assignment already just now.
Yep.
I couldn't. The only thing I found was the raw. So are you saying that you can do it without? You can have a parameterized query without raw, or was that something else that you had to cover?
Okay, so to clarify what I said about connects raw and parameterized queries, all of this here right now,
Yeah.
this is all parameterized queries 100%.
Okay, and there's no raw.
I have not used raw in here anywhere.
Okay.
Like, what I've done here, that's all parameterized, like this where and the or where.
Yeah.
Those are going to be parameterized queries on the back end. Once Connects builds it out, it will behave safely as I would want it to do.
And that's just because of Connect?
It's how Connects translates the query. Yes. So is it because of Connects? Yes, but it's because this is the syntax that is going to do that for me. Where I would get into trouble is if, let's take our or where here, and I'm going to replace it with connects.raw, teams.city equals single quote. Let me make this template string. If I did that, that's where I would get into trouble. That's bad. Because there I'm taking user input and I am shoving it into the string of my query. And yeah, I'm trying not to say it that way. For directly, thank you. I'm putting it into the query directly, and there's no filtering, there's no parameterization, there's no protection whatsoever happening. This is going to go through exactly as it was typed in on the command line. And that's bad. Yeah. So we don't want to do that.
Can I see what you wrote with the question mark again?
With the question, oh, yeah, so if I did this,
That's okay.
that's okay.
Because okay, and that data is got square braces around it, square brackets around it when it's defined, right?
When it,
Constant values data.
It's just data. It's just data.
yeah, it's just data.
It's just a connect parameter.
It's just me passing a param to the function at this point. So what connects is going to do raw, meaning unfiltered in this case, is this part of the query. But this question mark here says there is a parameter in this query.
Right.
And the second parameter that I am passing here is going to get put into that spot.
Yes.
But
That's within the documentation.
yes,
Okay.
should be.
I think the clarification is just like it will do the same thing as the parameterization we did elsewise, which is it automatically will escape out the.
Right. This is still safe.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess just because I read the documentation and people's blog posts and whatever, everyone was saying you have to use raw, you have to use raw. So then you're saying well, you don't have to use raw, and my brain just fell out of my head.
Cool.
So I'm just trying to like.
There it goes. No.
That's the case.
So keep in mind that a lot of documentation that you're going to, or sorry, a lot of blog posts and things you're going to read, check the date on them. If they come from like 2015, 2016, they're almost irrelevant because the library has advanced since then. And most definitely, I can tell you that we would want to use this version. And that will parameterize the query, guaranteed, cross my heart. Yeah. Connects.raw is a workaround for certain bits of SQL syntax. It's not the answer to the question of how to do this correctly. In fact, generally, if you're in a situation with connects where you feel like you need to use connects.raw, you probably want to sit and think and then double check the current documentation and say, is there a better way to do this?
Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how I got there because I started with the documentation. It said
Right.
raw. I got confused what that meant. So I looked up some blog posts. They're all saying raw. I come back, I look at it again, it all says raw. So I believe you.
I promise this works.
I
No.
missed it.
And that's a totally fair perception because you're only as good as the reference material that you have been using to learn from. So in this particular case, there is a lot out there that's going to say that raw is the way to make this happen because raw was a way to make this happen, but it's not the only way.
Is it in the documentation that you can do this way?
It's not going to call out specifically to say this is going to make a parameterized query.
Okay.
That's the thing.
Yes.
Uh,
Any parameterization on there says raw. Like the word parameter.
Right.
Parameter binding. Yeah. Down on the left column.
Yeah.
That's how I got. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you will see examples like this, but that's raw parameter binding. Yeah. Let me see if I can find another example. Yeah, here we go. So this is two different ways to write that same thing. So ID greater than 10. And the or where name tester. So that's passing an object. Guaranteed that tester is going to get parameterized.
I mean, it makes sense. And
Yeah.
I was surprised that I had to do raw to do it. So.
Right.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. That was quite a conversation. Victoria and Erin has just done her best to translate all of it. So that puts us at 334. We're looking at how to construct a query using these methods, and as callback is going to take the same callback as before and allow us to process whatever the results are. And like we saw this morning, at that point it's just a JavaScript problem. We have an array of data, they're objects, we're going to loop over them, we're going to display them or manipulate them however we want. But when it comes to manipulation of data, Connects has one other feature, which is particularly important that I want to show you. So Connects has a feature in it called migrations. And migrations are something that you will learn to appreciate over time, because what they allow you to do is to have version control over the schema of your database. So what a migration is a bit of JavaScript that you can run that will allow you to programmatically make changes to the structure of your database, not the data in it, but the structure of it, what the columns are, what data type they are, whether tables exist or not. So you can programmatically manipulate that and have those changes either be applied or have those changes be rolled back. If, for example, you find out that that's not the right way that your database should be, instead of having to go and write a whole bunch of manual alter table commands, Connects actually gives you the ability to programmatically address this with built-in methods. So, there's a whole section here for migrations, and there's a set of command line tools that are associated with it. In fact, one of the really cool things about Connects is it has its own set of command line tools. And one of the things you'll see here that is recommended is to install Connects globally. That way, anywhere on your system that you might be, you have Connects just as a command that you can run. So if you are wanting to set up Connects in a new project, which I will hop into a new directory and do right now, I can type Connects init. And when I do that, it's going to complain. Try running npm install Connects. Really? Clearly I have Connects right there. Flip. Well, the thing is, you'll be installing it as a dependency in your project anyway. So, it's because I have a package.json file in the directory above me, and because it wants to embarrass me in front of my friends. So, when I run Connects init and it actually works, I get a nice green line instead of red lines that tells me that it created something called a connectsfile.js. And if I look at that file, it is literally just an object being exported. But this is where my configuration would go for Connects talking to my database directly. So I have different environments set up here. We can see keys for development, staging, and if I scroll down a bit, we see production. So what does that mean? Well, let's say I'm building a project. You know, hypothetically, I don't know, maybe tomorrow I might start building a midterm project. Crazy, I know. Work with me. And let's say that I'm working on it on my machine. That would be my development environment. And my development environment would be where I would be actively coding. Most likely, you know, I've got my Git repository here, all my branches that I'm using. But it's not going to be where my app runs from when other people use it. I might be, for example, deploying my app to production. That would be like Heroku, for example, or DigitalOcean or AWS or whatever server I might be pushing it to. That would be my production environment. My production environment is going to have different database connection settings, most likely. It might have different file paths for certain things. It might have different versions of libraries in there. There's a lot of different things that might occur in between development and production, but I don't want to have to write a whole bunch of if statements in my code. I don't want to have to, if I am on this server, if my IP address is this, do this thing, otherwise do some other thing. I just want connects to be able to work regardless of where it is. So this is the configuration that allows me to define my connection settings for different environments, and then connects will just respond to that. We can simplify this quite a bit if we want to. Well, actually, let's do it this way, since we're going to be using Postgres anyway. I can make it nice and simple and have these just be my connection settings everywhere. So database, for example, would be hockey. And now I don't have to touch anything else. And I have connection settings. I could just have one environment everywhere and just hope that my username and password are the same in all those places. But I have, out of the box, it will give me these different environments to make it easy for me to configure for my app running in different places. So then, what I would want to do is require my connects file in. And I want to require connects, and when I require connects, it's a function that I can run and pass my config to, and now I have a connection to my database. Connects automatically connects for me. Try saying that 5 times fast. So now I'm able to run the queries that I was looking at before. We saw this output earlier. And there we go. So it works, which is great. But that's if I'm using my players and my team's database. What if, for example, hypothetically, I wanted to add an arenas table to my hockey database? I've decided that tracking players and tracking teams isn't enough. I now want to track the arenas that these play in, these teams play in. So I could totally fire up pSQL, and I can go create a table, and I can go manually add the columns and do that sort of thing. Or I can take advantage of my command line tools with connects, and I can tell it to make me a migration, and we're going to call it create arenas. And it tells me in green, which is generally a good sign, that it has created a migration. It's also created a directory for me called migrations. And you'll see that the beginning of the file name, like it still says create arenas, but that the beginning of the file name is a timestamp. That is year, month, day, hour, minute, second, if you read it from left to right. And so when I look at this file, I have 2 functions in here. And one of them is named .up and the other one is named .down, and they are keys on the exports object, which means they are automatically going to be exported from this file. And they're named this way for a very specific reason. Up is the method that is going to be run when I apply this change to my database. Down is the method that's going to be run if I undo this change from my database. So up applies the change, down rolls the change back. And what I'm able to do now that I have this, is I'm able to come down here and look in my schema building section and see that I get to do some really cool things, like, well, what do we want to start with? Well, I want to theoretically create a table. So connects.schema.createTable. So we can see from the example here that's what's happening is we're creating a table called users, and it gets a callback function that is passed a table. And then we have table.increments. Anyone want to take a stab at what that's probably creating? Bingo, ID. And then we're going to have a string field that is going to be called name. And table.timestamps is going to give us created at and updated at, and have them be automatically set to be updated with the current time when a row is created or updated. So now I have 5 lines of JavaScript code that keep me from writing create table users, ID serial int, unique not null. Like I don't have to do all of that now in order to create my table. And in fact, I can take this and I can kind of just paste it in here, and let's swap out users for arenas. Now, the other thing that I get to do that's really cool, and this is one of my favorite things, is what's called references. So references sets the column as a foreign key. So I would want to have, for example, table.integer and team ID, because the arena is associated with a team. I now have a foreign key. That's a lot easier to look at, to read, to maintain, to deal with. So I've said that this team ID on my arenas table points to the ID column on the teams table. And Connects takes care of making that association for me. And then when it comes to getting rid of it, all I need to do is drop the table, because that would roll all of those changes back. Doesn't matter what data is in the table at that point. If I'm rolling this back so that the arenas table should not exist anymore, I'm dropping that table. I got questions coming in from from Victoria. If you use connects to make that table before the teams table was created, would the references function not work? That is an awesome question, Dylan. You are correct. It would not work. Because in order for me to reference the teams.id, teams has to exist. So I do have to think ahead of time what my schedule is going to be, like what the right order of operations is going to be for me creating my schema. Now, here's the really cool thing about migrations and creating a schema is I would use this in this example where I need to create a table because there's a whole resource that I want to have available. But I might also want to use this just to alter a table, maybe adding a column, maybe dropping a column, maybe adding an index to something. Instead of going into pSQL and doing that manually, or going into MySQL or SQLite 3 or any of the command line tools to talk to my database schema directly, I would want to do this in Connects with a migration. Here's why. Let's say I'm working on an open source project. I've got this is a hockey app that I've made open source, and Leon decides that he's a huge hockey fan all of a sudden. Surprise. and he really wants to use this app to keep track of his favorite players and favorite teams. Well, if I've gone in through pSQL and I've done all my manipulations manually, and he downloads my app and tries to run it, it's going to fail because it's going to be relying on indices or foreign keys or columns or tables even that may or may not be there. But if I have committed all my migrations and I provide him in the README the instructions, hey, check out this GitHub repo, npm install, and then run, connects migrate latest, which is my command to run all of my latest migrations, then his schema is automatically going to be caught up to where mine is. And so this has become a standard part of leveraging open source software, is if there's a database behind it, whatever database library was used, whether it's Connects or Sequelize or Massive or any of the number of other ones that are out there, it has this idea and this theory of migration so that your schema always matches what is necessary in order to be able to run the app at that time. So, with things like the references, it allows me to create my foreign keys. I can set defaults. For example, I can set a default value for the column when something's inserted. I've got the ability to create a whole bunch of different types of columns: big integers, text, string, float, decimal, boolean, date time, timestamp, binary columns, enum columns, JSON, JSONB columns, UUID columns. If it is a data type that is supported by the database engine that I am using, like Postgres, MySQL, MariaDB, SQLite 3, whatever it may happen to be, if it's a data type that's supported, I have the ability to create a field of that data type. And the up and the down just allow me to manage what happens when that migration gets applied versus what happens when that migration gets rolled back. So if I run connects migrate latest, oh, it's going to complain because I just did something dumb. Right. I had run this before, and I had created coaches instead of arenas, and that file is now gone. And it wants that file. So, one sec. A lot of times when migrations are being created, you will see table get shortened to T just because it's easier to type. T still references table. And it kind of doesn't matter what I put in here. I'm just doing this to take care of the fact that it's looking for there we go. So we can see that it tells me that it ran the migration and it created the arenas. And so now if I go into pSQL just to look at my table, we can see that my arenas table exists there now. And if I look at the schema of it, we can see that it has the ID, the name, the team ID, the created at, the updated at. And we can even see down here that arena's team ID foreign is a foreign key referencing team's ID. So we can see that behind the scenes, Connects translated my migration into what needed to happen with the create table syntax for that to be a valid table now in my database. And now, of course, theoretically, if I find out the Canucks' ID, which is ID 28, I can manually insert into arenas, name, team ID, values, Rogers Arena, and 28. Oh, darn. This is what happens when you swap from JavaScript to SQL too quickly. So now it's inserted that. So now theoretically in my app, what I can do is I can connect arenas as callback, error rows, console.log rows 0.name. Nope. And there's all the teams that got printed out, and then there at the bottom is Rogers Arena. So I can now query that table using connects. And if somebody downloaded my app from GitHub and they didn't run my migrations and they tried to run that, that would throw an error because it would be trying to do select star from arenas from a table that doesn't exist. So migrations allow me to keep the version of my database up to date. And to go back in here, what we can see is that there is actually a connects migrations table where connects keeps track of what migrations have been run and which ones haven't, which is why I got that error before, because I had run a migration earlier on this table or on this database. If we look at the command line options for connects, we can see that one of them is to get the current version. And it's actually probably clearer to Victoria than it is here, but we can see that it's 2019, 01, 29, 15, 42, 53. That's the current version. That's that timestamp for my Create Arenas migration that I created a few minutes ago. And that way I can look at the current version because timestamp is the default to do. I can look at the current version of my database and find out when the last time a migration was applied, because I can see literally the date and time that that migration was created. So that lets me know. I can also compare. If I look in my migrations folder, well, one of them is 2018, one of them is 2019. That one matches the current version. If there's any that are numerically greater than that, then they're waiting to be run, and I need to run my migrations. And that will get my schema up to date. Migrations are your way as a dev for keeping that schema up to date with what your app needs. It is okay to have as many migrations as you want. They are free. You get as many as you want. You're not going to get charged extra for making new ones. And having 25 migrations in a project isn't a bad sign. It means actually a good thing because it means you are working incrementally. You're adding stuff to your database when you need it. Until you need it, it's not there, not a problem. But once you need it, great, make a migration, add that column, set a default value, change that column's value type, like whatever it is that you need to do, add a whole other set of tables if you want. But once you have applied that, fantastic. Now you have access to that data structure to be able to work with, query against, insert into, whatever you want to do with the connects methods. So it seems like that there's extra work that you're doing here when the PG stuff that you were doing earlier worked just fine. But I promise you that after you get used to working with connects, PG seems like knocking rocks together to make fire. So, questions? Victoria, how are you guys doing? And again, guys in the most generic sense. You sent Dylan with our prime question earlier. Cool. All right. So, yeah. I mean, just to speak to that again, if my arenas depended on, say, that coaches table, then I would have to absolutely make sure that coaches was created before I tried to create arenas. Otherwise, that references would fail. Foreign keys need the other table to be there first. So, worst case scenario, you have to sit down and be like, okay, I'm going to make a migration for this, and then I'm going to make a migration for this, and then I'm going to make a migration for this. And you can even make 4 or 5 migrations in a row and have them be run all at once, but they'll be run in order, and that means the teams table would get created before the arenas table, and you would be good. Oh. Is it a problem to go back and add a foreign key? No, not a bit. In fact, what I can do is I can create an alter. So I'm an alter table user. And so, for example, here, by using this alter function, I'm saying that I want to change something about this column. So I could easily say t.integer, team ID, dot references, teams.id, dot alter. That's telling Connects to alter that particular column to be the way that I want it to be, that I'm specifying now as a new thing. There's also ways to add an index, drop an index. I don't think there's a method well, references is the method for setting the foreign key. So yeah, I would just do dot references and then dot alter at the end, and that tells Connects that something is changing about that. Shmoo.
Under what circumstances would you be using down?
So let's say that I really didn't like that that arenas table I just did. Maybe I need to go back and change the specs on it. I need completely different columns. Maybe I tried to import data into it and it completely just crapped the bed, and I just need to nuke that table. Connects, migrate, rollback is going to roll back that migration that I just did. I now have no more arenas table. So it's when I need to undo some schema operation. Maybe I created a foreign key on the wrong table and I don't want to have to go back and do another migration to fix the last one. Where I run into problems with this is if I have, for example, created a migration, done an action, committed that migration into my repository, pushed that migration up to my GitHub profile, and somebody else theoretically has downloaded it and tried to run my app since then I just have to follow along with more migrations to undo my mistake. But if I'm just in development and I realize, oh god, that was dumb, what I call an FID error, which stands for fuck, I'm dumb, you'll see in some of my commit messages that I'll describe what happened and then there'll be FID at the end, and it means I was just like, I hit my head or something. But yeah, like maybe I put completely the wrong set of columns in there for what I needed, or maybe I need to change a data type. Classic example of this was a real life case where I had a database that I set the data type to be integer, and it was supposed to hold phone numbers. Really bad idea, because no 10-digit number, no phone number over 241 is ever going to go into that column. So everybody who added like a 604 Vancouver phone number, it got capped out at 241, 347, whatever that number is, which is 2 to the 32nd. And so I had to go back and run a new migration to change that field to be an unsigned integer instead of a signed one. And so, yeah, I couldn't, because that had already been pushed, because people were using that, I had to do another migration to fix my mistake. But if I'm just in development and I realize completely the wrong stuff, or I went to import data and it just crapped out, yeah, roll back the migration, fix it, make a new, rebuild the file completely if you have to, and then that would be the one that you commit that does the right thing. Yeah, make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. So just to be clear, tomorrow when you start your midterm projects, you will be using Connects. So I encourage you to start adopting the habit of building the queries, using .as callback. We can talk a little bit about the .then version, because you'll see a lot of blog posts and things like that use .then, and it just takes a callback at that point. We can talk about that one another day. But yeah, you will be using Connects for your midterm project. That will be an expectation from a tech perspective. So go ahead and dive in and start getting comfortable with it. I promise you won't regret it. Like there's tons and tons of enterprise production apps that are actually using Connects as their query builder. So this is relevant tech. Is it a problem to go back and add a foreign key? Yeah, I did. That's was the one I was talking about with .alter. Yeah. But thanks for keeping me honest. Cool. Yes, Tony.
Can you go to the connect file.js? Because you delete a bunch of code and
Yeah, I just took it down to one set of settings instead of all the different environments. So the connects file.js, if I do connects init and get connects to generate the file for me, I get 3 different environments: development, staging, and production. I wanted to simplify it. I explained what the environments were, but to simplify it, I just created one set of connection settings. And then when I required it in, I required in the connects file here, and I passed that as a parameter to the connects function. So that's what connects used for its connection settings. Otherwise, I have to tell it which environment to use. This just makes it easier. Yeah. Make sense? Cool. Good. Again, thank you for keeping me honest. I did kind of gloss over that in a wax on, wax off kind of way. Yeah. Oh, closing the connection. Yes. So, not streams, not pipes. I don't even think there is a dot close. Thank you. Dot destroy. So the same way that I was using client.end before, what I would do here is I would do connects.destroy. So I would do that inside the callback. Otherwise, I'm going to end up destroying my connection pool before my results come back. So the exact same way that I used client.end before, I'll use connects.destroy to close everything down. In the context of a full web application, you're probably not going to want to do that every single time you make a query. In the context of a command line app, yeah, I probably want to do that once I'm done making all my queries. With connects being used in Express, when Express shuts down, it will automatically clean up everything that is open within that process. That will include your connects connection. But connects.destroy is how you can manually close your connection, and it's a good thing to do from the command line, in your script here, once you are done making all your queries. So I would put it on that one. I would not put it up here inside this one, because then when I tried to do this second query on line 8, it would fail. It would say that it's not connected to the database anymore, and I'd have to redo basically line 2 to get my connection back. So yeah, connects.destroy will close that down, and that's why I had to hit Control-C. So now, for example, if I run this app, actually, let me put my arenas table back in. Oh, why is it complaining? Oh, I don't actually have an arena anymore because I dropped that table. So that's why it's complaining. But it did properly shut down. There we go. Nope. It's the same mistake I made before. There we go. Now it shuts down properly because I destroyed the connection after I had done that second query. Does that answer your question? Cool. Other questions? These are fun. Yes. Okay, that's a really good theoretical question. So the question is, let's say you're in the situation where um, you've made a migration, you've committed that migration, turns out that wasn't something you wanted to do, and you need to write another migration to fix it. What do you put in your up and your down? So your up would be the code to fix it, but then what do you put in the down at that point? Well, you have to think about what the down represents. So the down is to undo whatever change would be. Stylistically speaking, the most correct thing to do is to reverse whatever the change is in the up. Even if it is taking you back to a state where things are not the way you want them to be, because otherwise somebody applying migrations incrementally and then maybe rolling back or moving backwards and forwards in time may not actually, if you make the down be fixing the whole thing going back 2 steps, you're going to put them in an inconsistent state. So that the next time you apply that migration, you have to think about, if you apply that migration and then roll it back and then try and apply it again, would that up actually work based on where you took them back to in the down? And if the answer is no, you've now broken your whole chain of versions for your schema. So that's a really good question. Yeah, stylistically, just from an timeline integrity point of view, even if it's rolling you back to a state where you don't want things to be, that keeps the whole chain consistent so that all the migrations can be applied at once. Make sense? Cool. Awesome. So I will package this code up and send it out. And then you guys will get to dive in. I will go ahead and say that tomorrow's lecture is going to be a kickoff for project planning for your midterm projects. So it's not going to be about code. It's going to be me being even more opinionated than usual about things that you should be thinking about before you start coding your midterm project. And so we'll be going over things like how to make tech choices, how to make product choices, what are the kinds of things that you want to think about when you are planning out what you're going to build, and what goes into that. There is a Git collaboration exercise that you are going to want to do today. And when I say you're going to want to do it, I mean this is going to keep you from having a lot of grief over the next 5 days. And if you don't believe me, ask anybody sitting on that side of the room. They will tell you, but they've stopped paying attention to me a long time ago. So you want to have a good understanding of Git and how it works when you are collaborating between multiple people. And if you're not feeling comfortable with that, then this exercise is going to save you. I'm sure all of you have had perfect Git workflows over the past 3.5 weeks. All of you have been doing great branches and all of that, and nobody's coding on master, right? Yeah, do this exercise. It will save you grief. Cool. Thanks, guys.